Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we will introduce you to some of the less hyped monsters of the Godzilla universe, who deserve to be brought out of their retirement. We all know about the benevolent Mothra, but are you aware of the other Moth Kaiju, who is Mothra's dark counterpart? King Ghidorah's alien origins have been explored to a great extent, but did you know there's been another alien Kaiju in the Godzilla universe, who traversed at least 243 light years to land on Earth? Then there's Baragon, who not only stopped a rogue Godzilla from destroying Japan, but also fought Frankenstein. There's also the gliding lizard Kaiju Varan, the dinosaur Kaiju Gorosaurus, and many more on our list of underrated monsters, who all deserve a louder shout-out from Godzilla fans. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Destoya. Let's begin with the crustacean monster Destoya, whose name says it all. Introduced in the 1995 film Godzilla vs. Destoya, the latter was Godzilla's final opponent of the Heisei era, whose origin story dates back to the events of the first ever Godzilla movie. In 1954, the oxygen destroyer detonated under Tokyo Bay to kill the OG Godzilla had awakened microscopic crustaceans at the bottom of the bay, who had survived for millions of years. As they continued to evolve at an accelerated speed, they were stirred up by underwater construction work in 1996. Arriving on the surface, the mutated crustaceans fed on micro-oxygen and integrated with each other to form human-sized monsters. Attacked by Japan's Self-Defense Force's freezer weapons, the creatures transformed into a single unit, with a height of 120 meters and a wingspan of 210 meters in its final form, which could shoot concentrated beams of micro-oxygen from its mouth. Scientist Kensaku Ijuin named it Destoya, as it had turned into a living oxygen destroyer. Meanwhile, Godzilla was on the verge of a cataclysmic nuclear meltdown, and to save the world, the G-Force compelled Godzilla to face Destoya in the hope the latter would finish off the first. Destoya faced off against not only Godzilla, but also his adoptive son, Godzilla Jr., who was brutally killed by an intense stream of Destoya's micro-oxygen rays. Having absorbed DNA from Godzilla Jr.'s blood, Destoya turned into an invincible form, dragging Godzilla with its grappling tail pincers and piercing through Godzilla's flesh with its laser horn. After enduring blows from a superheated Godzilla, Destoya attempted to escape by flying, but the JSDF's aerial attacks resulted in its staggering fall to the ground, which was already critically heated by Godzilla's presence, thus destroying the Destoya. While micro-oxygen projection was Destoya's biggest weapon, the monster's many forms were also equipped with structural weapons like the horn katana, a pair of pincer-like secondary jaws, spiked claws, and a pincer tail. The fact that Destoya fought Godzilla when he was at the peak of his power and survived his red spiral atomic ray makes it one of the most formidable opponents of Godzilla. A monster that takes on several forms as it evolves and emerges victorious in several encounters against Godzilla is definitely worthy of more attention in the Godzilla universe. Gabara. Our next monster here is a pretty interesting one, as he only existed in the imagination of Ichiro Miki, a kid from Kawasaki, in 1969's All Monsters Attack. Owing to his parents' busy schedules, Ichiro mostly spent his days alone, escaping into the imaginary world of Monsterland, where he witnessed Godzilla, his son Manila, and other monsters. In real life, Ichiro was mistreated by a bully named Gabara, who took the form of a mutant amphibian kaiju in Ichiro's imagination, and had a bullying attitude towards Manila. As per Ichiro's imagination, Gabara was once a toad who mutated into a 58-meter tall, bipedal, ogre-like creature after being exposed to radiation from nuclear blasts. Despite his amphibian origins, Gabara looked more like a tailless Godzilla with multiple horns on his head, whose design was inspired by the Oni, a Japanese folklore ogre-like demon. In order to defeat Gabara, Manila sought Ichiro's help and together they set out a seesaw-like trap, which sent Gabara flying in the air after Minilla jumped on one end of it. After recovering, Gabara managed to bite Godzilla once, but was incapacitated by his atomic breath and was tossed in the air, following which he retreated in defeat. Subsequently, Gabara also appeared in the shows Go Godman, in which he was a mutated bullfrog, and Go Green Man, in which he remained hidden inside a kaiju toy. Gabara was equipped with quite a number of menacing powers, which he mercilessly employed to torment Minilla. Gabara could release electric charges from his arms, blasting his opponents with 100,000 volts of current, like he did with both Godzilla and Minilla. Gabara combined his electric powers with the right-hand hammer punch, knocking down his opponents in one blow. In the shows, Gabara could release an intoxicating smoke from his mouth, had detachable venomous claws that could cause explosions, and was seen engulfing a kid. What makes this underrated Showa-era kaiju worthy of more love and attention in the Godzilla universe is that he represents a latchkey kid's fear of bullies, with his powers originating from the kid's imagination. Megalon. Next, we have the insect kaiju named Megalon, from the Showa era of Godzilla films, who first appeared in 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon. Toho created Megalon to cater to the 1970s audience's piqued interest in the heavy use of practical special effects on screen, known in Japan as tokusatsu. Megalon was the guardian deity of the subterranean kingdom of Seatopia, which was ravaged by repeated underground nuclear testing. Angered by the humans' damaging influence on Seatopia, Emperor Antonio summoned their protector deity Megalon, a beetle-like kaiju, to teach the surface people a lesson. And to guide Megalon on Earth, the Seatopians stole the advanced robot Jet Jaguar from its maker Goro Ibuki. Jet Jaguar led Megalon into a face-off against the Japanese self-defense forces. Megalon took hits from their maser cannons, which he survived, and then he proceeded to destroy the JSDF. Once Jet Jaguar was freed from the Seatopians' influence, he reached out to Godzilla to fight Megalon, while Emperor Antonio reached out to the alien cyborg kaiju Gigan to join the fight. This led to an epic clash between a Megalon-Gigan collab and a Godzilla-Jet Jaguar team-up. With Godzilla showing the kaijus who is boss, Gigan fled to space, and Megalon was called back underground by the Seatopians, with all portals to the surface sealed. Megalon had a gamut of powers in his insectoid arsenal. He could make fiery napalm bombs rain down on his opponents from his mouth. With this ability, Megalon was able to shoot down Jet Jaguar from the sky and entrap Godzilla in a fiery circle. Megalon could also fire lightning-like energy beams from his horn, which was powerful enough to diminish buildings. Megalon's biggest weapon was his drill-like appendages, which, when combined, turned into a single gigantic drill that could burrow beneath the surface. Weighing 40,000 metric tons, this Showa-era kaiju was capable of generating hurricane-like winds with its wings. Megalon made a cinematic appearance 50 years later in the 2023 short film Godzilla vs. Megalon, which was made to celebrate the kaiju's 50th anniversary. Despite Megalon's extensive comic book and video game presence, he remains underappreciated mainly due to his limited movie appearances. Bolante. Let's move on to Bolante, who is as unique a kaiju as is underrated. Bolante, first introduced in the 1989 movie Godzilla vs. Bolante, comes with a bizarre origin story, one that makes her a genetic cocktail of a rose, the soul of a deceased young woman, and Godzilla's cells. It all started when scientist Junichiro Shiragami, working for the Saradian Institute of Technology and Science, attempted to create a plant species that could survive the harsh weather conditions of Saradia. But he was stopped in his tracks when his rival organization, Biomajor, authorized bombings of the Saradian Institute, which not only destroyed Shiragami's experimental advancements, but also resulted in the death of his daughter Erika. Fast forward 5 years, and the scene shifts to Japan, when Shiragami has set up his new laboratory on the shores of Lake Ashi. Devastated at the loss of a loved one, who had procured Erika's DNA from her blood samples, spliced up a rose bush with the human DNA in order to preserve Erica's soul forever. His most prized possessions, the roses spliced with Erica's soul, were preserved safely in a glass terrarium in an extension of his laboratory. However, an earthquake generated by the eruption of Mount Mihara led to the destruction of the rose bushes. Panicked at having lost the remaining traces of Erica, Shiragami decided to splice up one single rose with Godzilla's G cells to make the rose invincible, thus making Erica's soul immortal. Shiragami's scientific interference escalated the rose's genetic modification, resulting in a gigantic plant monster, which Shiragami then named Bolante. In her first form, Bolante towered at a height of 85 meters, with a gigantic rose for a head and rows of teeth at the center of it. She fought Godzilla for the first time in her flower form in Lake Ashi, strangling him with her long vines, which extended beyond her body. When Godzilla blasted Bolante with his atomic breath, her nucleus hemorrhaged, causing her petals to fall off. Bolante, with her ability to break into spores, escaped Godzilla's attacks and dispersed into the sky, only to return a few days later in her beast form. Bolante returned as a 120-meter-tall kaiju with a crocodilian head and her maws lined with unending rows of teeth. With her ability to spew a corrosive sap on Godzilla, she managed to disorient the king of the monsters by raising his body temperature and activating the ANEB bacteria that humans had injected Godzilla with. Heavily injured at the end of her final battle with Godzilla, Bolante broke out into spores once again and floated away into space, thus becoming the kaiju who was never really killed by Godzilla at the end of the storyline. Despite Bolante's powers of immortality, combined with her ability of enhanced regeneration, she remains underappreciated mainly because of her single film appearance. Though the character has been explored in games and comics, Bolante deserves a definite spot in Monsterverse. Ebirah. Look at who we have next. Ebirah, another crustacean kaiju, who is so aggressive that he not only challenged Godzilla twice, but also proceeded to mock and intimidate him with his menacing body language. Introduced in the 1966 movie Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, the titular antagonist was a 50-meter-tall lobster-like kaiju who attained its colossal size after being heavily mutated by nuclear waste from the Red Bamboo Terror Group's activities on Lechi Island. Ebirah circled the waters around the island, preventing ships from entering or exiting the island, except those belonging to the Red Bamboo, who released a yellow liquid in the waters that repelled the kaiju. Ebirah was initially conceptualized to fight King Kong, but was eventually included in a Godzilla movie. In order to make Ebirah menacing enough for the King of the Monsters, the designers emphasized on giving Ebirah creepy mouth movements while preying on humans, with the addition of gigantic pincer-like claws measuring up to 15 meters during the Showa era, crustacean whiskers, a scythe-like pointed crest on his face, and spikes on his back. Ebirah's claws were so strong that he was able to drag Godzilla underwater multiple times and throw boulders at him, and occasionally skewering humans if needed. Godzilla eventually bit down on Ebirah's claws and tore them off in the end, forcing the sea monster to retreat. Ebirah briefly appeared in All Monsters Attack in Ichiro's dream as one of the monsters who fought Godzilla. Ebirah made a comeback 35 years later in the Millennium series film Godzilla Final Wars, in which he was mind-controlled by the alien Exilians and prompted to join Hedorah in fighting Godzilla. Ebirah's powerful claws were his biggest weapon, which got an upgrade in the Millennium era. Ebirah could regenerate his claws when severed, as seen in Godzilla Final Wars. In the 1992 manga Godzilla King of the Monsters, Ebirah could release cryogenic foam, which froze Godzilla in just a few seconds. A crustacean sea monster of Ebirah's strength, who proved to be a threat to Godzilla in water, remains somewhat underappreciated and deserves to be reintroduced on the big screen again. Varan. Our next candidate is the flying lizard monster Varan, a formidable foe on land and in air and water. The Triphibian kaiju was introduced in the 1958 standalone film named Varan, 10 years after which he debuted in the Godzilla series with blink-and-miss scenes in Destroy All Monsters. After the success of Godzilla in 1954 and Rodan in 1956, Toho wanted to create a kaiju combining an aerial monster and a water monster, resulting in the creation of Varan. He was designed much like Godzilla, but with membranes between his limbs on both sides of his torso, like a monstrous version of a gliding lizard. Fun fact, Varan's scales were designed by pressing peanut shells, which were readily available on the sets of the film, as the modelers sculpting the kaiju were sent peanuts by their relatives. In the movie, Varan's extremely durable scales prevent him from incurring any damage from the JSDF's conventional weaponry. As per the Godzilla Giant Monsters Super Encyclopedia, Varan's flight speed matched that of the Showa-era Rodan. In his standalone movie, Varan was an ancient reptilian creature called Varanipede, which evaded extinction by surviving for millions of years underneath a lake in a Japanese village. The ferocious kaiju was feared by the villagers as the Baradagi mountain god. When Japanese scientists investigated the emergence of a few Siberian butterflies around the village, Varan emerged from the lake, attacking the natives. When the JSDF counterattacked, he dived off from a mountain, glided across the sky, and disappeared into the ocean, only to emerge in Tokyo later with a rampaging spree. Varan met his end when he devoured explosives deployed by the JSDF, which exploded inside of him, creating a mushroom cloud over the ocean. In Destroy All Monsters, a juvenile incarnation of Varan was living on Monster Island, who did not really engage in battle, much like Manda and Baragon, and only observed the Earth monsters facing off against Ghidorah. With his dominance over land, water, and air, Varan was a unique kaiju who was considered for multiple projects that were later scrapped. Despite his comic book and game appearances, Varan remains an underrated kaiju who deserves to make a comeback. King Caesar. Next up, we have a kaiju inspired by Japanese folklore. What happens when a mythological creature is woken up from its slumber in the Godzilla world? It takes the form of a powerful kaiju. That's King Caesar for you. Modeled after the Shisa, a legendary creature from Japanese mythology, King Caesar was part lion and part dog in appearance. First introduced in the 1974 movie Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, King Caesar was the guardian monster of the Azumi royal family of Okinawa, who could only be thwarted by a mystical artifact. Long ago, when Okinawa was attacked by mainland invaders, King Caesar protected the royal family and their subjects and drove the invaders away. In the 1974 movie, the Shisa kaiju, resting inside Cape Manzamo, was reawakened by the film's protagonist and the last remaining member of the Azumi royal family to battle Mechagodzilla and the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens. When King Caesar was almost defeated by the robot Godzilla, the original king of the monsters came to his rescue, and together they destroyed the mecha monster. Having defeated his opponent, King Caesar returned to his slumber, only to reappear 30 years later in Godzilla Final Wars. Mind-controlled by the Exilians, King Caesar was sent to fight Godzilla at Mount Fiji. King Caesar, who matched in height with the Showa-era Godzilla, was a bipedal creature with patches of fur on various parts of his body and crocodilian patterns on his skin. Several protrusions on his head looked like gemstones, which gave the appearance of a crowned head. King Caesar's most noticeable feature was his big ears, which could stand upright to express agitation or intimidation. King Caesar had prismatic eyes, which gave him the unique ability to capture energy beams from his opponents with his red gemstone-like eyes and shoot them back at the target, a move he repeatedly used against Mechagodzilla's space beam attacks. While the furry kaiju has made several screen appearances, he was never really the primary character in any. Considering he and Godzilla made such a great tag team, it's time that King Caesar is awakened from his slumber yet again. Gorosaurus. Now let us introduce you to the dinosaur kaiju Gorosaurus, whose most notable weapon was his kangaroo kick. Yep, you heard that right. Toho introduced Gorosaurus for the first time in 1967's King Kong Escapes, created as a homage to the meat-eater dinosaur that famously faced off against King Kong in the 1933 film. Gorosaurus was then inserted in the Godzilla series with 1968's Destroy All Monsters. In the Godzilla movie, At the end of the 20th century, Gorosaurus was contained in Monsterland along with other kaijus of the Earth. When the alien Keloqs infiltrated the island and took control of the kaijus, they sent Gorosaurus to destroy Paris and demolish the iconic Arc de Triomphe. The Keloqs also stationed Gorosaurus at Mount Fiji to guard their base of operations. When Gorosaurus was freed by the Keloqs' influence, he joined forces with Godzilla to battle King Ghidorah and proved to be the most instrumental ally. With his signature kangaroo-style kick, Gorosaurus managed to severely damage Ghidorah's spine, bringing him to a staggering fall. Gorosaurus' blow enabled Godzilla and other monsters to finish off the space kaiju. With the Keloqs and Ghidorah destroyed, Gorosaurus eventually returned to Monster Island. In King Kong Escapes, Gorosaurus lived on Mondo Island and exhibited a destructive nature. When Gorosaurus attempted to attack Lieutenant Susan Watson, he irked the wrath of King Kong, who defeated the dinosaur opponent by breaking his jaw. Gorosaurus also appeared in the 1973 series Go Godman as an opponent of the titular Godman. However, the Gorosaurus suit was in really bad shape by the time of Go Godman. Given how Gorosaurus proved to be an asset to Godzilla in the battle against King Ghidorah, this dinosaur kaiju is worthy of much more attention than it has received to relieve itself from its underrated title. In addition to his kangaroo kick, which was a pretty savage move, Gorosaurus attacked his opponents by biting, like when he locked his jaws on Kong's leg. He could even jump up to 30 meters using his tail and burrow up from underneath like he did in Paris. In the 1993 game Godzilla King of the Monsters, Gorosaurus was given the ability to shoot fireballs. Interestingly, Godzilla terrestris from the series Godzilla Singular Point appears to be reminiscent of the Showa-era Gorosaurus. Hedorah. Next up, we have Hedorah, the alien kaiju, who stood as an allegory for pollution and was created by Toho to deliver an environmentalist message. Introduced in 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, the alien life form landed on Earth on a comet after traveling for 243 light-years. Incessantly feeding on Earth's pollution, Hedorah underwent several evolutionary changes, from being a tadpole-like creature to an aquatic form, then to a quadrupedal reptilian form, then to a flying saucer-like form, before finally taking on an upright, structured form, much like a walking pile of sludge. Hedorah, in its evolving forms, was easily beaten by Godzilla, but during the final showdown at the top of Mount Fiji, the smog monster, with its acidic body and powerful eye beams, almost destroyed Godzilla. By this time, Hedorah had grown taller than Godzilla. Hedorah could only be defeated by the combined efforts of Godzilla and the gigantic electrodes created by the JSDF. When Godzilla charged up the electrodes, the machines dried out Hedorah, which was mostly made of sludge, and reduced its husk to a pile of dirt, thus destroying the smog monster. However, the possibility of another Hedorah rising out of Earth's pollution continued to loom. The Millennium-era incarnation of Hedorah appeared in Godzilla Final Wars, in which the sludge monster was mind-controlled by the alien Exilians. Under their influence, Hedorah and Ebirah proceeded to fight Godzilla in Tokyo Bay, but both were destroyed by the King of the Monsters. Being an alien kaiju who fed on pollution, Hedorah had a nasty set of abilities, the most sadistic of them being his acidic sludge attacks. Hedorah could launch pieces of its acidic body to burn its opponents, while also drowning them in acidic sludge, as it did with Godzilla. With its sulfuric acid mist, which was strong enough to corrode metal, Hedorah disoriented Godzilla and made him gasp for breath. It could also shoot powerful laser beams from its eye. Being a hive organism, Hedorah's most unique ability was to break out into smaller Hedorahs when attacked, which could then merge back any time to make the main structure more powerful. Considering Hedorah was an unusual opponent that Godzilla crossed paths with, and that the monster represents an environmental message, this alien kaiju is worthy of fresh attention in the Monsterverse. Batra. Now it's time to meet an alien moth kaiju. No, we're not talking about Mothra. We are referring to her dark counterpart Batra, a fierce protector of Earth, often cited as Black Mothra. Batra made his debut in 1992's Godzilla vs. Mothra, which introduced him with an intriguing origin story. Over 12,000 years ago, when Earth was flourishing peacefully with Mothra as her divine protector, an advanced civilization invented a machine to regulate Earth's climate. Earth detected the human intervention as a major threat and created Batra to obliterate anything and everything that would disrupt Earth's natural order. As Batra proceeded to attack humans, he was stopped in his tracks by Mothra, who sealed him off in the North Sea for thousands of years. When a meteor stirred up Earth in 1993, Batra was released from his confinement and resumed his mission of obliterating humans. In his larval form, he challenged Godzilla to a battle during which both the monsters fell down through a volcanic fissure. Batra emerged again, this time in his fully metamorphosized form as a giant moth, to seek revenge from Mothra. However, the two moth kaijus were compelled to join forces when Godzilla proved to be a bigger threat to Earth and humanity. They defeated Godzilla, but Batra lost his life, with Mothra tragically circling over Batra's final resting place in the ocean. Mothra then took up Batra's next mission, which was to fly into space and stop an asteroid from crashing into Earth. Batra's final form had a wingspan of a whopping 180 meters, with yellow, black, and red patterns on his wings. Batra had horns jutting out of his head, husks on both cheeks, and glowing red eyes, all of which portrayed him as a contrast to the gracious Mothra. Batra's most notable weapon was his electrically charged prism beams, with which he blasted Godzilla in his larval form. In his final form, Batra could also release energy from his 3 pairs of feet to attack opponents in close combat. As a larva, Batra could move around underground by tunneling and also proved to be a challenging foe in water. Batra was a brilliant monster in himself, who has been majorly overshadowed by Mothra's widespread popularity, and remained undervalued with just a single movie appearance. To see Batra make a comeback on the big screen would indeed be a pleasant surprise. Baragon. Hold your ground, guys, because it's time to introduce the subterranean kaiju Baragon. The Showa-era monster was a descendant of the Mesozoic reptile called Varanus dragon, and made it to the modern world by dwelling underground. The reptilian kaiju was first introduced in the 1965 film Frankenstein vs. Baragon, 3 years after which it appeared in the Godzilla film Destroy All Monsters. Initially, Godzilla was supposed to battle Frankenstein in the 1965 film, but was later replaced by Baragon, an underground monster who could burrow his way up to the surface of the Earth to surprise attack his opponents. In Frankenstein vs. Baragon, when the latter devoured humans and livestock in the dark of the night, Frankenstein was held responsible for the exploits. Frankenstein eventually defeated Baragon by breaking his neck, though he was dragged down into a fissure created by Baragon along with a dead monster. In Destroy All Monsters, Baragon was a silent spectator who witnessed the battle between Earth monsters and King Ghidorah. Fun fact, Baragon was supposed to burrow into the Arc de Triomphe from underneath in Destroy All Monsters, but owing to complications from its deteriorating suit, the burrowing responsibility was given to the Gorosaurus. The Millennium-era incarnation of Baragon featured in the film Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah: Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. In this movie, Baragon played a benevolent role as one of the 3 ancient guardians of Japan, alongside Ghidorah and Mothra, who fought against Godzilla. Though Baragon has had quite a fan following over the years, he has never really been as popular as Mothra or Ghidorah, and remains underrated in that sense. The Showa-era Baragon had a distinctive appearance with a horned forehead, bulging eyes, floppy ears, and a stubby muzzle. He transformed into a more aggressive form for its Millennium-era incarnation. The reptilian kaiju could shoot short streams of fire called the Death Ray from his mouth to attack opponents or weaken the ground, while his bioluminescent horn enabled him to see while burrowing beneath the surface. An expert at tunneling, Baragon could disappear under the ground within a matter of seconds. In GMK, Baragon's subterranean movements were interpreted as earthquakes with a moving epicenter. With his tunneling ability, Baragon was able to weaken the ground under Godzilla in GMK. However, he proved to be no match for the king of the monsters. Kamacuras. Last but not least, we have the praying mantis kaiju Kamacuras, which first appeared in the 1967 movie Son of Godzilla. The Kamacuras, with large claws and orange eyes, were produced when an experiment carried out by scientists working for the United Nations went wrong on the remote Solgel Island. The scientists were working on a weather controlling project with the goal of ending world hunger, when unwarranted radio frequencies interfered with their experiment and triggered a severe heat wave on the island, resulting in radioactive rain. 3 human-sized praying mantises native to the island were mutated by the radiation, further increasing their size to colossal proportions, thus giving rise to the 50-meter-tall Kamacuras, matching Godzilla's height. Even before their mutation, the praying mantises were predatory in nature and became all the more aggressive and villainous in their kaiju form. The 3 Kamacuras dug out the egg carrying Godzilla's son Manila and forced the baby Godzilla to hatch untimely, only to bully the little one with their claws. When Godzilla arrived to save Manila from the Kamacuras, he incinerated one and dismembered the other, frightening the third one. The last remaining Kamacuras continued to haunt the humans on the island until Manila unwittingly awakened the spider kaiju Kumanga, who killed the praying mantis kaiju with its venomous stinger. A bunch of Kamacuras appeared in 1969's All Monsters Attack as part of Ichiro Miki's imaginary world, when they attacked Godzilla and were defeated by him. 35 years later, an incarnation of the Kamacuras returned in Godzilla Final Wars, when the Exilians sent it to destroy Paris and then attack Godzilla in Japan. The obnoxious Kamacuras also appeared in the 2017 anime movie Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, in which they were the first monsters to attack humans, causing a death toll of 2.5 million. The Kamacuras primarily fought with their gigantic claws, one of which is shaped like a spear and the other like a scythe. The claws were powerful enough to pierce and slash enemies and tear through the colossal egg containing Manila. As the Kamacuras were mutated forms of praying mantises, they were equipped with wings, which enabled the Millennium-era version of the kaiju to dart through the air so fast that it almost appeared invisible. The Kamacuras were experts at camouflaging with their surroundings, enabling them to ambush Godzilla during face-offs. Despite their multiple movie appearances and extensive comic book presence, the Kamacuras are still one of the lesser talked about kaiju. Owing to their bizarre origin story, colossal size, and predatory intentions, the Kamacuras are one of the zaniest monsters in the Godzilla universe, which have the potential to fare well in the Monsterverse. Marvelous verdict. With that, we have come to the end of our video, and also the verdict that all of the above-mentioned monsters need to have the limelight shine on them again. Bringing these kaijus back as allies or opponents in Godzilla's cinematic universe would be a refreshingly chaotic change for both the King of the Monsters and his fans. Which of the monsters would you like to see make a comeback in future Monsterverse movies? Tell us in the comments below. And if you liked our video, please give it a shout out and watch this space for more marvelous content.